Good evening, everybody, and you're very welcome to our Monday show. We're going out across the multiple platforms, as is ever the way. This might be an interesting one when it comes to YouTube. We'll talk to our special guest about that in a moment. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for being here. So we've got a really interesting, quite serious topic. Very serious topic to talk about tonight, actually. But I think you'll find it worthwhile if you stick with us. But before we get to that, just a couple of things. First of all, a reminder for everybody that yes, there will be a special live event in London on the 12th of September. So those of you who may be gathering for the Tommy Robinson event on Saturday, the 13th of September, well, myself and Peter McElvenna of Hearts of Oak will have a very special evening on the night before. Not associated with Tommy Robinson, has to be said. Different guests, different topics, but nonetheless, it's in London town. So I'll be bringing my stab vest with me, and hopefully, I will survive it. But if not, what a way to go. By the way, did you see Donald Trump's comments about Sadiq Khan today? Did you see that? He called him a nasty man. Doing a very bad job to the horror of Keir Starmer. That was good. I did laugh at Trump's press conferences this past couple of days. It's been very entertaining just watching him take the proverbial out of Starmer and this kind of regime we've got in the UK. And I mean, hopefully, we're putting this out, as I say, on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Getter, and X. The way X is behaving at the moment, I don't know what will appear actually, because the online safety bill has kicked in. And in fact, actually, I might talk to my special guest about that, get her thoughts on it. But so actually, without further ado, I'm very pleased to bring you back someone who's been on with me several times. She's a great guest and one of those few honest journalists that we have, and we don't have many of them. And that is my friend Jacqui Deevoy. Jacqui.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
No, it's a pleasure to have you back, Jacqui. It only seems like yesterday since you were here, but as I grow older, time goes faster.
That's what happens, yeah.
It is what happens. One moment it's like, I think it was January, February or whatever, and then all of a sudden,
it's not like when someone mentions the year 2005, you think, oh yeah, a couple of years ago, and it's actually 20 years ago.
Yeah, it doesn't do that, but dwell on those things. I'll tell you, we really want to get into the documentary that obviously you've made, Jacqui. But before we get to that, just as one of my random thoughts, I wonder, what do you make of this? I found in the past 48 hours on X, and specifically on X platform, because of the online safety bill, which is keeping everybody safe in the UK, all of a sudden you can't push stuff out. There's warnings attached. It's becoming a real censorship, which is something we talked about in the past. Actually, have you any thoughts on the what's happening with this online safety?
Yeah, the only thing I've noticed in the last 48 hours is that I'm getting a lot fewer views and fewer comments. There's been no labels attached or any warning notices or anything like that I've noticed. But I've definitely noticed, thinking, quite often I put up a post and you get the views start coming immediately. But the last 48 hours, they're much slower to build and there's less of them. And like I said, fewer comments. So I think it's not being seen. Not all the stuff I put. I do a real mix of stuff. I do some pictures of me, going on a nice day trip and interspersed with some much darker stuff. And I think that might throw them a bit. I don't know. It's not a constant avalanche of political stuff, It's like, here's what I think of abortion, and here's a picture of a cat, So it's kind of like I try and get a balance. I don't know if that works, but
I actually deliberately posted a picture of a cat earlier today on the basis that I wonder, will this get through the censorship web, But I find that I've had a sort of a massive collapse in views, and my stuff's always very consistent. Doesn't change much, Jacqui. Every now and again it might shoot up, but it's pretty consistent. And I guess it's to do with the fact that X in the UK is being clearly having to conform to the new online safety thing. But of course, half the people, or a lot of people, seem to have discovered VPN. I
Yes,
did like. Did you see? Have you seen that?
Yeah. I mean, they say this online bill is all the safety bill is all to protect the children. We know that the government don't care about the children. If they cared about the children, they wouldn't have done what they've done over the last 5 years, which pretty much destroyed the minds of so many children. And it was terrible for children and teenagers and young adults. Absolutely awful. They don't care about the kids. It's just another ruse, another excuse to exert more control over people and more surveillance as well.
Absolutely, Jacqui. That's something we both see it the same. I think a lot of people see it the same. Actually, this is actually some of the stuff that we chatted about years ago. Certainly in the early, the sort of COVID tyranny time, and it's just taken them a few. It's taken them a few years. But the thing that kind of irritates me the most about it. I mean, yes, Stormer has brought it in, but it was the Conservatives who set it up. Do you know what I mean? One's as bad as the other, and no lectures from either of them on free speech, Jacqui. I think
I mean, they're all in it together. The whole party thing, as we know and have discussed before, it's theatre. It's just theatre.
Yeah. So, it is.
They're all working together, and everything that we see. Starmer wasn't voted in; he was going to be put in whatever. In my view, I've never believed that the people have a voice in this country, not for a long time anyway. And it's all planned out in advance, and it'll go to that plan whether we like it or not. And as for that bill, I don't even. I mean, we were talking about that for the last 4 years, probably, that this is going to happen. And I don't know whether it matters that people don't really care very much, because it's going to be put in place anyway. So it's really tricky, because it's like, I didn't vote for that. Did you? So are we living in a tyrannical sort of state now? I think it seems that we are.
Yeah. I mean, there was an online petition. I don't know if you saw it, Jacqui, to basically scrap it, and it got something like, in the past sort of 48 hours, 300,000 or 400,000 people signed it. And the government came back and said, thanks very much, but by the way, we're going to proceed with it. It's what we've always said. It's the pretense of democracy, and you've got to be able to say it like that. There's no good guys. I
mean, a lot of us are standing up against all these things and not really getting anywhere. So we either have to, I don't know what the solution is, because they want us to rebel. They want us to revolt. They want there to be civil uprising. And then they can, I mean, I've been saying this for like 20 years. Once they've got the people, once they've got the peasants revolting, they will then bring in like martial law, which then is the beginning of the end, really, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, a friend of mine was saying, Jacqui, that they agree with what you've just said. They want a response, and then when they get a response, what you'll get is the uni party, both parts of it, coming together and saying, well, this is very dangerous for a democracy, so we're going to have to lock you all up. I mean, basically, because I think it scares them what might happen down the road a bit, by 2029, even though I've got all sorts of concerns about reform and whatnot, loads of concerns, but by 2029, that uni party stranglehold could be smashed. And I don't think they'll let it go just as easy as that. I don't think so. No, without a fight. And so we'll get to watch it. But anyway, in the meantime, you've been doing lots of good work. So, folks, one of the main reason I wanted Jacqui to come on tonight, and I'm really, as I said, pleased to have her, is that Jacqui has got a new documentary out, which I've watched and which I would recommend to all of you. And what I thought we would do, Jacqui, to start with is we'll play the little trailer. It only lasts for a couple of minutes, folks. So, but watch the trailer, and then Jacqui and I are going to talk about On Scene, which is all about the death. Shocking, really, the death protocols in the NHS, Jacqui. But we'll get to that. But can we just play the trailer, please, first?
The world grappled with a global health crisis. A shadow fell over Britain's elderly and vulnerable. It was growing sore loss. Have emerged that those in power, the bourgeoisie, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and their lackeys in Parliament, waged a calculated assault on the weakest members of society. Care homes and hospitals, once places of refuge and healing, were reported to have become sites of unimaginable horror, where families were denied access to their loved ones and controversial medical protocols led to countless deaths. The Scottish COVID inquiry opened some people's eyes to the scale of these events, exposing what some believe to be a deliberate effort by complicit media to obscure the truth. Reports of withheld food and water, the use of powerful sedatives like midazolam and morphine, and the blanket imposition of do not resuscitate orders paint a chilling picture.
Because that's it. As it used to give my mom palliative care medicines, I'm getting used charged with my the event house to my mom. But we won't know that. We won't know to do anything.
These murders didn't take place in isolation, but in context of a giant population pyramid with an aging population. Rising pension liabilities, economic pressures, and a colossal national debt with a rotten economic mode of production incapable of solving these issues without a mass culling or a mass rearmament for war. One question remains. If the government claimed to prioritise protecting the elderly in 2020, why and how were protocols like NG163 and NG191, alleged to have hastened thousands of deaths, implemented? And now, with the passing of the assisted dying bill, has the narrative shifted from safeguarding our elderly and disabled loved ones to deeming them a burden? Britain in 2025 shows the decadence and wanton disregard for human life characteristic of a neo-fascist character. This is Unseen, the truth behind the death protocols. In this documentary, investigative journalist Jacqui Deevoy and me, filmmaker Richie Brown, follow the stories of 8 families devastated by these state-sanctioned protocols where politicians, doctors and nurses were empowered to decide who should live and who should die. Despite the Scottish COVID inquiry receiving scant attention, even from alternative media, the testimonies we heard compelled us to shine a light on a very dark chapter in Britain's history, a chapter marked by moral decay and a chilling disregard for human life. Join us as we uncover the truth behind these protocols and confront the uncomfortable questions they raise about our society.
The shielding of vulnerable people and the elderly, who are the most affected by this virus, that is in our plan.
I feel my mother was murdered, basically, and I think that's why it's very difficult for me to get over it.
And she got morphine and midazolam. It's the first, even asking the question, first time I'd known about the use of midazolam. And that's when I realised I'd actually let it happen on my watch. And I'd gone in to stop it and still never stopped it.
I think the midazolam and morphine was a massive factor because I feel like even with the ventilator.
So did you know she had been put on an end of life pathway?
Yes, they put her on that. They said she was 76, she's coming to the end of her life. And my mum was nothing like it. She had nothing wrong with her at all. She was as fit as me, and the only thing she was doing was grieving my dad.
The COVID inquiry has been told that Matt Hancock wanted the ultimate say on who should live and who should die.
Yep. So, Jacqui, there we go. That's the trailer, the official trailer for the documentary, which is available to watch. We'll bring up the links and stuff. But just to kick off with, just tell me how you and Richie got into doing this. What was the process?
Well, I hadn't heard of or met Richie until January this year, when he contacted me and asked would I be interviewed by him for his own podcast. He had been looking into it himself independently and had heard about my work, and that's why he reached out to me. So I went on his podcast, he interviewed me, and afterwards, a few days later, we just said there's room for another film, basically, because obviously I did A Good Death back in 2021 with Iconic Media, and that was a very much watched film on the Iconic platform that's run by Jamie Ike. We had, I think, we interviewed 6 people in that film, so I think 5 families. And at that time, I set up a little WhatsApp group just to keep all the people that I've been chatting to about this in the same place. I think when I made that film, there were 16 to 20 people in the group. and now there's nearer 200 people in that group, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I've spoken to probably more than 1,000 people who are all telling the same story, and that's just me, one person, doing it in my own time. Most people, a lot of people don't want to join a WhatsApp group. A lot of people find it too unsettling and too upsetting to be going over and over what happened to their loved one, And it's not just the elderly. This is something that I've been emphasizing from the start. Everyone thinks, oh, it's really old, ancient people, at the end of their lives, they're in their 90s, they've got terminal illnesses, they're all going to die anyway. And this is something that a lot of the mainstream journalists, I mean, I have been a mainstream journalist myself and still am sometimes, but people like Isabel Oakeshott, who I had a bit of a to-do with, in a very way. I mean, she actually said publicly on X, or I think it was even Twitter back then, that all these people talking about their loved ones being killed in NHS facilities are all a bunch of crazies, wanging on is the word she used, wanging on about their loved ones. It was so just crass and awful and insulting to these people who have, they know for a fact that this is what's happened because they've got the medical records. They've seen it with their own eyes. Some of them have seen their loved ones being murdered in front of them, and they've seen the drug charts. And they're some of them are now going legal. We have one case, the Dimmock inquest has been going on. I went to it. I've known Paul Dimmock for a long time, and there's the inquest into his father's death. It's taken this long to get. He's been working on it since 2020. The inquest started in March. We had 5 days in Southwark Coroner's Court. Didn't come to any conclusion. Well, because we hadn't had a chance. They hadn't had a chance to interview all the witnesses, to get all the witnesses on the stand. And that's resuming on August the 11th through to the 15th, so a whole week, Monday to Friday, at Southwark Coroner's Court. It's a public hearing, and we want to get people down there. In March, the week we were there in March, there were empty spaces, in the court. But this time we want people down there to support Paul and his family, because it should come to a conclusion on the 15th, hopefully this time. But it was quite, I mean, it's going to be, it's setting a precedent basically, because the outcome of this is going to have a big effect on other people and other people who've been through the same thing as the Dimmock family.
Yeah. And the documentary itself, which I have watched, Jacqui, and it's a lengthy documentary. It's a very human documentary as well. Like, as you say, when you get people talking about what's happened to their loved ones, and as you said, there must be about half a dozen or so different. Like it's incredibly powerful. I found when people just talk, because the awful thing about some of this is that I feel that some people have just moved on. We've all moved on, Jacqui. Get with the gig. You can't move on if you've lost someone dear to you.
Not if you lost them like this. Not if you lost them to murder. When you lost a loved one in this way, number one, you can't grieve. You just don't. You can't. I've experienced it myself with my dad in 2021.
Yeah.
I mean, he met a horrible end. I spoke to you about it in a very similar way. Yeah. And I don't think I've grieved for him. I don't think I've even cried or anything. But and you can't, and you also you can't rest, until you get justice. Yeah. First, you need to find out exactly what happened, and then once you found out, then you need to get justice. And if you can't do either of those things, or even if you can't do one of those things, you're not going to be able to grieve. And if you can't grieve, you're stuck in this horrible state of limbo. Most of the people I've spoken to, they can't eat, they can't work, they're anxious, they're depressed. It's a terrible state. So when these people have been involuntarily euthanized, shall we say, which is actually murdered, it doesn't just affect that person by their lives being, being ended, but it affects it's got a ripple effect. It affects everyone around them. It can, each person, it can affect, tens, 20s, hundreds of people around them. And this is something that people don't realize. And I think what you're saying about the film being very personal, that's kind of common thread throughout the three films that I've produced. So with A Good Death, we did a very similar thing. I mean, I was actually in that film doing with the interviews with the people, which I didn't particularly like doing that. I don't really like being on screen particularly, but it was important to do it that way to begin with. And then with the second film, Playing God, which it was a much broader look at democide in the UK over the last 50 years. So democide is death by government policy. And what people don't realise is that, you know, these guidelines that are put into place by NICE, which is a very nice name for such a demonic organisation, they think it's some kind of separate entity. It's not. It's run by the government. You know, so it's not an independent, you know, organisation that puts these protocols into place. This is fed down from the government right back to the health secretary, who at the time we know was Matt Hancock. And with the main protocol that they brought in 2020, a lot of people know this now, but they didn't at the time. NG 163 was the protocol. It's almost identical to the Liverpool Care Pathway, which was abolished in 2014, and they surreptitiously brought it back in, called it NG 163, thinking no one would notice, but it had exactly the same method. They were using the same methods to basically end people's lives. So they were using dehydration, starvation, withdrawal of essential medications, and the administration of end-of-life drugs, usually an opioid combined with a benzodiazepine, so morphine usually with midazolam or lorazepam or something like that. And these two drugs, when they use concomitantly, they actually depress respiration, yet they were using this as a protocol for an alleged respiratory disease. We know there was no such thing. So people were going in with irregular flus or chest infections or asthma, and they were put on this protocol. They used ventilators as well, which they realized pretty quickly were killing people. So they stopped that. I think that was in January 21, they stopped using the ventilators. And then they started using this Liverpool Care Pathway, reinvented, and people were dropping like flies. But when Matt Hancock wanted to introduce NG 163, he actually showed it to a panel of doctors and professors, two professors, 9 doctors, and all 11 of them said, you can't use this protocol, it's going to kill people. And he implemented it anyway. So that's where it all began.
Jacqui, on the Liverpool Care Pathway, because I think the documentary starts there. It's a Liverpool family, isn't it? And that seems to go back to 2012, 2013. Just in fact, what you said, because by 2014 they knocked it in the head. But I was really interested to hear their story when I think it was their dad. I mean, maybe you could just talk us through what happened in that, because I thought that was horrific.
Yeah, Julie James, she's since become an activist for end-of-life care, as they call it. And yeah, her dad drove himself to hospital, actually. He wasn't feeling bad, stomach cramp. I mean, he wasn't feeling well, stomach cramps, was diagnosed with constipation. Next thing, he's in ICU, you know, at the end of his life. And the whole thing, it became huge. It was headlines in all the papers. It was before the Liverpool Care Pathway had been abolished. This was 2012.
Yes. That's right.
Been on this. He was a man in his late 60s, and it went to court. The hospital wanted to put him on an end-of-life pathway, and the family said no, he's not at the end of his life. So the hospital took the family to court. Julie talks about it in the documentary. What we've also done with this documentary is we've separated all the interviews we've done into separate videos. So we're uploading them now at the moment. If you go to where the film is showing on Richie Brown's YouTube channel, if you scroll down under videos, you can see the separate interviews coming up. So some of them are an hour long, some of them are a bit longer. It's the whole unedited interview. So, for example, if you were more interested in what Julie has to say, you can then go onto Richie's YouTube channel, scroll down, see the full interview. And we've done that with all 10 people. That there were originally 8, but now there's 10 people in the documentary. So you can hear the full story, because obviously with a documentary you can't fit everyone's story in. It'll be 12 hours long, you know. So we've done that so people can actually, you know, go in there and hear the full story.
Yeah, because as you, I mean, the thing about that one that struck me, Julie's story, was, as you say, her dad basically went in the hospital with constipation, and they had him in end of life care. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and of course, this triggers all my sensitivity. I consider the NHS to be profoundly evil. You see, I don't have any illusions about it, Jacqui. You know,
Yeah.
but some, when you hear stories like that, you go, my God.
Well,
they're-
the sad thing about that story is they spent so much time toing and froing in and out of court.
Yeah,
Could have been spending, you know, with it's Julia and her mother could have been spending with her dad and with her mother's husband, and instead they're being dragged into court by the NHS. And in that time, he died. So you know, the whole story is absolutely tragic.
And actually, Jacqui, I think at one point, one of the legal things was there's 5, they have to go to some court, I think it's in London, and there's like 5 doctors sitting there with their barrister, and it's just Julie and her relation or whatever. And the judge actually says to the doctors, go back to your patients. You know, why are you here in a court? I mean, do you know, I mean, that was actually unexpected. That's a good judge. Not too many of them, Jacqui, but but you know, but it does say something about priorities. 5 doctors in a court to try and make sure they can basically, you know, democide this guy. They want to, and the judge actually saw through it. But this is the horrors, and I mean, it's very interesting that you've broken the individual stories down, so people want to go and look at that. I mean, although I sort of seen this, like, if there's kind of recurrent themes throughout it, basically, I think, you know, not least the, I don't know, is it the cruelty of the NHS? What is it, Jacqui? How would you link all the different cases?
Well, when we did A Good Death back in 2021, we interviewed people separately. We hadn't like conferred before. None of them had met the other, you know, and they were all telling almost identical stories.
Yeah.
And they were all replying. If I asked them, for example, why do you think this is happening? Every single one of them said, it's the money, you know, it's all about the money. And sadly, it is, you know, my dad had his life ended prematurely. And I worked out, if he was only 76, a young fella. So I worked out, if it lived to be 96, if it, you know, which I'm sure he would have done had that not happened to him, he would have cost the government another £500,000. That's just in pensions and stuff. It's not even, you know, hospital care. And so, you know, it's clearly. And I remember back in 2020, there was, we actually showed this this page from I think it was a BBC report initially saying that. This COVID is a bit of a kind of the blessing in disguise in a way, because it's going to, the people who are dying from this killer virus are mainly the elderly, the pension age people, and now the government is saving loads of money. So, you know, every cloud, and they're almost like not making a joke out of it, but like being pleased, or, you know, just celebrating the fact that all the elderly are being bumped off and the government's going to save loads of money. Isn't that brilliant, you know?
So it can't have surprised you when the government then earlier this year brought in their, well, I call it the Assisted Murder Act, but you know, the assisted dying. It's so Orwellian.
Well, it's assisted suicide. Now, if you and I wanted to have someone assist us to commit suicide, that person would be arrested and charged with possibly with murder. You can get up to 14 years for that, and obviously, if it's proved that you actually helped that person to die, you can be charged for murder up to life imprisonment. But if that bill gets properly put into place, then that's not the case anymore. And somebody said to me recently, if you want to kill someone, or if you want someone dead, just get a doctor to do it, because the doctors are allowed to do it. But your average man in the street isn't allowed to do it at this moment in time. But I don't know how it's going to go in the future. We can't let that happen, because obviously with MAID in Canada, we've got the slippery slope going there. It's just 1 minute it's terminally ill people, the next thing it's if you're a bit poor, or next thing it's children, saying they don't want to be alive, or children with cancer or what have you, or people with mental health issues, wanting to die. or disabilities. So it's a terribly dangerous slippery slope if that bill does get properly put into place.
Yeah, but on the bright side, Dame Esther Ranson would be happy, wouldn't she? So that balances it, does it not?
That is a funny thing, isn't it? Because she's like, a staunch supporter of assisted dying. She's allegedly been dying of stage 4 lung cancer for the last
long time. Yeah,
3 years. I mean, there must be some kind of record. Reminds me a bit of Stephen Hawking with the ALS. Where most people die within 5 years, and he lived like 55 years with it or something. Anyway, that's another story. But yeah, if she's so keen on it, she's got a bit quiet now that it's all going ahead. I think if she could say anything, she'd probably say, "Oh no, I didn't mean it for me. I meant it for the peasants." But the other thing is, on paper, if someone is terminally ill and they're dying and they're in terrible, terrible pain, you would think it's only kind for that person to have the choice to die, if they really, really want to. But my point is that what happens is it extends to people who aren't in terrible pain and they're not terminally ill and they're not dying. And the films that I've made are focusing on people who are those people who are not at the end of their lives and they're not terminally ill. And in many cases, like I said to you earlier, they're not even elderly. So in my group alone at the moment, there are parents and grandparents of young people who have been involuntarily euthanized. And also we've got the case going on at the moment that Kate Shemarani's daughter, who died in hospital last year, Paloma, and Kate has got a lot to say about that and what actually happened there. She and then one of the things Kate has talked about publicly is the fact that she believes that the medications that Paloma was given in hospital are the medications that are used when they prepare someone for organ harvesting. So, of course, this is another very deep, dark rabbit hole, if you want to call it that. The whole issue of organ harvesting, what that entails, what it involves, what it really is. And then you start looking at, it all kind of comes together. You start looking at young people that have died in these situations. And you start to question, is that what they're doing? I'm back in 2020. I spoke to a consultant cardiologist at a London hospital, and this consultant told me that everyone that was coming into hospital at that time, they were pretty much everyone. DNRs were being put on them. So that, not everyone, but everyone over 60, people with physical disabilities, people with mental health issues, children with autism. So all these categories of people are having DNRs, do not resuscitate orders, put on them as soon as they went into hospital for whatever reason. She mentioned a schizophrenic woman who had a DNR put on her who was 30. Then she told me the story of a guy who'd, I think he had taken his own life. He was in hospital, and she said, he was on, I think he was on a ventilator, and she said there were loads of doctors around wanting to know whether his organs could be taken, could be harvested for transplant. And she came in and she couldn't believe this situation. And she just did a kind of fake check of him. And as a cardiologist, they're like, is his heart okay? Can we take the heart? Can we take the heart now? And she's like, no, the heart can't be, because she didn't want it to happen. So she just said, no, the heart can't be used. I'm sorry. And they were like, oh no, that's so disappointing, So it does make you wonder what's going on, because
it really does, Jacqui. It absolutely does. And actually in the States at the moment, there's a lot of controversy about the whole organ harvesting thing, which is kind of scary, because you read these stories about people who, they die, but then 30 minutes and within 30, I think it's the protocol is the death and then 30 minutes and then they go in to harvest. But sometimes they wake up. Sometimes, have they actually died? I mean,
the whole idea of brain death was brought in the late 1960s, I believe, possibly early 70s, to facilitate the harvesting of organs. So brain death is just a myth in a lot of cases. Now, I've been speaking to Dr. Heidi Klessig, I just spotted her on social media, and she had written a book, I think it's called The Brain Death Myth, which you can actually buy at the moment. And she was actually stating, she actually said in a thread, this is how I got talking to her, that she was complicit in murder by dismemberment. So I started talking to her and put together, because she recounts the tale of when she was a junior doctor, and they had prepared a patient for organ harvesting. She went in, and the senior doctor said to her, "Oh, can you give the patient some anaesthetic?" And she was like, "Well, why? The patient like brain dead." And the senior said, "Well, just to be on the safe side." It's like, what? And then you get all these stories of the Lazarus reflex. I'm sure you've heard about that. When bodies make these movements, when they're about to have their organs removed from their body. It could be their eyes, it could be their hearts, it could be any part of the body. And the movements that they make, this so-called Lazarus reflex, is they're the movements of a person trying to defend themselves, but who are under heavy sedation. So they put their arms around their body, they lash out, they try and turn away, the sort of thing a living person would do if someone was coming at them with a scalpel.
But that then brings us to, again, a common theme throughout your documentary, and that is like at the end of the day, these people are put in extraordinary circumstances with their loved ones in hospitals, and so they're turning to doctors, Jacqui, they're turning to nurses. And I'm thinking, what hell sort of people do we have as doctors and nurses when you listen to what these people go through? Because I'm not seeing too many angels.
Well, a lot of doctors and nurses are angels. A lot of them are brilliant. I'm sure, you might have been into hospital, or someone you know has been in hospital. They had fantastic care. They were really well looked after. Nobody came at them with the end of life drugs. No one tried to kill them, and they went and they were happy and they were healed, which is the way it should go in an ideal world. But over the last 5 years, we've seen this new breed, and they seem very separate to these the doctors and nurses who work in hospitals. They do the job they do because it's a vocation. They do it out of love. They do it out of kindness and caring. And then there's this other breed, and I don't know where they've come from. And I'm not talking about different countries. Some are from different countries, some aren't. But they're psychopaths basically, and they're like a death squad. And the reports I've heard from families about these people, they don't look you in the eye, these people, because they know what they're doing. They can't look the family in the eyes. They've got a modicum of guilt going on, but not enough not to do the job. I don't know if they brought in especially to do the job. It certainly looks like that. They're cruel, they're sadistic. Some of them are really sadistic, the things that they say to people. And I mean, the stories I've heard, one woman who's in my group, she doesn't mind me mentioning her name, Barbara Williams, when her husband was killed in hospital, seconds after he drew his last breath, they said, "Can we have his skin?" And she said, "Sorry, what for?" And they said, "Oh, he's got really beautiful skin." They're like vampires. They're like monsters, like, looming over the person who's just died, wanting to strip them of everything, quite literally. She couldn't believe her ears. I've heard some, I mean, that is a horror story, but they're all horror stories in their own way. They really are.
Yeah, I got to admit, whenever the government changed the legislation in terms of organ donation from being one of, you have to opt out of it now, whereas I think that's the way it works, isn't it?
Well, in May 2020, they brought in the opt-out system. So prior to that, it was an opt-in. If you wanted to be a donor, this is the sensible way. You would sign up.
That's the way it should be. Yeah.
And then, of course, it's no coincidence that it was brought in just after the start of the scamdemic. Brought in May 2020. Suddenly, you have to opt out. Now, a lot of people didn't even know about this. Of course, the mainstream media didn't, publicize this at the time, or very quietly if they did.
Yeah.
Even now, a lot of people don't know about it. But what we've discovered is that recently we've discovered that if you look at if you've got a driving license, if you have a look at it, section 12, if there's the number 115 next to section 12, it's usually on the back of the plastic card license. That means you're an organ donor. So even if you've opted out via the NHS, if you've got 115 next to section 12, that overrides your NHS opt-out, and you're still an organ donor. Are you getting your license out?
I'll do it afterwards. But the thing is that my wife had opted in prior to 2020. I'd never done one thing or the other. She then opted out. I opted out. To hell with them. You know, but yeah.
I've just heard in the last few days that you have to opt out annually. Once isn't enough. So if you opted out in 2020, like I did, you're an organ donor again now, because I haven't done it every year. I don't know if that's true. I'm trying to find out more about that at the moment. But also driving license thing that you need to check. And there's also letters that have been going out to people saying, yes, thank you for your opt-out, but you also need to opt out from the organ donation register, which you have to do through another website, not just through they're making it as difficult as possible for people to opt out. And even if you've done all of that and made sure that the DVLA have removed the 115 off your license, you've opted out here, you've opted out there. If you're in, say, I don't know, let's say a car accident or something, and it's all very rushed and your family don't get to your bedside in time, they'll just do it anyway. And once they've done it, it's too late. And, you know, what's the family going to do? And one of the stories, one woman told me about her husband. He was 54, so he was a young man. And, so it's such a horrendous story. So after he died, after he was killed, she said to her lawyer that she wanted a post-mortem done, because she had a lawyer, because they were looking into the death. And the lawyer came back and said, I'm really sorry, we can't do a post-mortem. And she said, why not? And they said, because they've taken his organs. And she said, what do you mean? He's not an organ donor. And he said, no, everyone's an organ donor now unless they've opted out. She was a nurse herself, and she didn't even know that. She didn't know that. And this was a year later, in 2021, a year and a half later, he was actually killed in November 21. And I mean, she's just absolutely horrified by that, because then there's just no hope. She gave up nursing. You know, she couldn't work in that arena anymore. Obviously, she didn't trust that the people that actually killed her husband were people that she'd worked with, that she knew. But then there's other reports, like I said, this strange breed of doctors and nurses, this psychopathic breed, who not only don't look you in the eye and don't speak to you, or people ask them questions and they just ignore them. A lot of them don't have name badges on. When people have tried to find out who that nurse was that delivered that final injection that killed their loved one, they can't find any trace of them. So I started to think, have these people been brought in to do this horrendous job, and then they just disappear, and they get paid really well, and it's part of the deal that it's all right, no one will be able to trace you? I don't know. It's starting to sound like a really, really dark conspiracy theory, or like a horror movie, or both. You know, it's really hard to believe that this would have happened, but it's certainly looking that way.
But yeah, exactly. And the point about it is really that whilst the Liverpool care pathway oxymoron was knocked on the head, the fact of the matter is it never did go away. These death protocols they're still there, like right now.
Yeah, it's still happening now. I'm getting people, in fact, just before I came on the show now, I had a message from someone, and I only glanced at it, and I could see him talking about something that's happened recently. He's lost a relative. I didn't have time to read it. I get these messages sent to me every day. I'm adding people to the group on a weekly basis, and and you know, people have told me. Just a man told me recently that his elderly mother was actually killed in the room while he was with her, and he's just in a state of shock. This was only a few months ago, you know. So and he just doesn't know what to do. He's trying. A lot of people try to go legal, but they find out very quickly. Number one, no one wants to take it on. Very few lawyers will take this on. Because we're going up against the NHS, against the government. You know, what chance have you got of winning? It also, people that have tried to go in, they realise quite quickly that it's going to cost them a lot of money. I had a friend who's she's spent about 20,000 trying to get the whole thing started to take the care home, as a care home where her mother was killed, into to court. And she ran out of money very quickly. 20,000 doesn't go very far when you've got a team of lawyers.
No.
So it's going to cost you at least 100,000, probably more. The NHS will drag it out for as long as possible, hoping that you'll get bored and tired, or that you'll run out of money, or that you'll get ill and can't cope, or that you'll die, preferably. They will drag it out. So, and it seems they've got a bottom. They say they've got no money and they're struggling. It seems like they've got a bottomless pit when it comes to these defending themselves against these. Accusations.
I think I saw a stat that the NHS, of their, what is it, their 160, 170 billion annual budget that they get. I think that's the number. Yeah. Anyway, about 5 or 6 of it is for legal. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, the lawyers get filthy rich on NHS cases. And as you said, it must be so hard for an ordinary family to figure, how do we go legal? Because
the majority of people who've lost a loved one in this way don't even know that that's happened. And it's a tiny, tiny percentage that even realize. It's only when they say watch a film like one of the ones I produced, or someone's said to them. I remember one guy coming to me because he said his mother had died in a care home, and I said, well, that's awful, what happened to her? And he said, well, she just died. And I said, well, what does she die of? And he said, well, neglect. And I said, what do you mean neglect? What feed her? He said, no, they weren't feeding her. And anyway, after a while I said, did they give her any medications? And he said, well, yes. And then he started looking into it, and he realized she was one of the Midazolam murders. And that she'd been given these end-of-life drugs when she didn't even need them, because she was in her early 70s. She wasn't terminally ill. Well, nobody needs them. Those drugs should never, ever be used for end-of-life, unless in extreme cases where the person is really dying. But even then, killing someone, euthanizing someone when they're terminally ill and dying in an agony, morally, we can understand how that might be, a good thing to do. But legally, it's still unlawful. It's a crime, unless you're a doctor, it seems.
Well, yeah, but see, here's the thing. I mean, one of my problems is this issue of, they're dying anyway. But who can say? Who can say if you're dying? Oh, you've got 6 months. Well, yeah, that's your opinion. I've got 6 months, but that could be wrong. A different doctor might say
nobody knows when another person.
Nobody knows, Jacqui. Yeah. No. Yeah. So that's what
saying, I know when you're going to die.
God. Yeah.
You're dying. And also, what kind of reasoning is that? You're dying anyway, so I might as well kill you. That's not.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And like you said, a lot of people have been given 6 months to live, and they go on to live another 20 years. Doctors make mistakes, as we well know.
Yeah, I remember my mother in her final couple of years, being told. I remember the family were brought in, and we were told, this is it, get ready. One evening, and she was there a couple of years later. She didn't go. And so I have this way. I can't accept anything to do with this assisted dying bill, because I don't care that 2 doctors agree on it, Jacqui. I don't know. They do not know. And this is, as you said, playing God. Perfect name for what you do. But it is, and it's completely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. And yet, it's what goes on. And then the other thing is, you must have found, talking to the people you talked to in the documentary, you can tell even talking, now, these people are still going through a lot of, you must pick it up when you're talking to them, a lot of trauma, a lot of just
it's heartbreaking. And like I said, you never recover from it. You're never the same after you've been through something like this. You become most people have got PTSD after they've been through something like this. It's a proper trauma, and like I said, until it gets resolved in some way, or until you get to the bottom of what happened and actually find out how they died, what happened, and get justice, you can't rest. You're not ever going to be the same person again. I mean, it's serious trauma. It really is.
Oh, it really is, and it comes across in the documentary when you hear the people. It's very powerful. It's very powerful, but when because it's very real. These are just real people who, as you say, and it probably is PTSD. That you hear them talk, and you look at them. Well, you watch them even looking at each other, and you can feel the stuff inside welling up, and it's.
We didn't do any run through before or anything like that. Same with A Good Death. We did that, and someone accused me at one point of saying the whole thing was scripted, and I thought, well, if that's the case, I'm a brilliant scriptwriter, and they should win Oscars because they're the best performances I've ever seen. Because you can't script that, you can't fake it, you can't make those stories up. They're so idiosyncratic. You wouldn't be able to imagine some of the things that they tell you. And I've got a good imagination, but I would not be able to imagine the majority of stuff that they've told me. I would not even be able to make that up in my worst nightmares.
Yeah, but as you said, having gone through it all, that there has to be a closure for these people, and that's of course what's denied them by predominantly the NHS, isn't it? I mean, the NHS are culpable in much of what the documentary shows.
Absolutely. I'd like to investigate more, but and I'd like to do more films. But one of the problems that we've had in making these films is that I've crowdfunded the last two, and at the Playing God, it took about 1.5 years from the start to the finish, and it wasn't because we were slow filming or editing. It was because we had to raise the money, as we went along, and there was always that risk that we weren't going to raise enough. We didn't raise enough, made enough to make the film, but and to pay a few people, but a lot of people did stuff for free, or they did things really cheap. This film, Unseen, we only raised £2,300, which and I don't know why we raised so little. I don't know. I really can't explain that, because so many people say to me, "Yeah, make another documentary," and then no one supports it financially. So we raised £2,300, which barely covered the costs of driving all over the country.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And probably covered the petrol, maybe. I don't know. We hired a car at one point. We had to stay at a couple of hotels, and obviously it's not just the money, it's the time, but it takes a lot of time. That film took us 5 months to make, and it's very, very difficult to spend so much time on doing something, because you have to pay your bills, and it's just so difficult to do it. And I would love to do some more, and I'd love to get a sponsor or an investor, because I've already got another 10 films that I'm thinking about. I'd like to look into organ harvesting, for instance. I've got enough people in just that WhatsApp support group for another 10 films on the same subject. So it's really, really difficult if you don't have the financial backing to do it. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that we're actually doing a real life premiere next weekend.
Yes. Down in Cardiff,
Yeah, it was originally going to be on Saturday and Sunday, but we've actually just changed it to just Saturday now. So it's Saturday at 6 p.m. at Cinema & Co., which is owned by the lovely Anna Redfern.
Who's been on with me. Yeah.
She is so lovely, and it's a fantastic little cinema. And I've got a link to that on I think it's a pin post on X, on Jacqui Deevoy one. So you can get tickets there. And it is a lovely cinema. It's got little sofas, and they bring you pizza and margaritas or whatever you want. The film's 2.5 hours long. There's going to be a break halfway, and we're going to do a Q&A afterwards, and we're going to hang around. Me and Richie are going to hang around for chats and afterwards, before and afterwards. I'm going to be there from about 2 p.m. So if anyone wants to come along early and sit and have a coffee with me or a margarita, that would be nice. And then. So I'm hoping to get some people down. It's in Swansea, obviously, which is
that's right. Yeah.
I say a trek, but it's not a trek for people who live in Swansea. So I don't know if any of your viewers would be able to come along, but I'd love to meet up with people.
So let me just say, any of my lot, that if you're in Wales, never mind Swansea. If you're in Wales, get your ass to Swansea. And go and see Jacqui. As I said, I mean, mind you, after watching this, I think I'd probably have to have a couple of margaritas, Jacqui, because it's like, The thing about it is, like, I have to say this, and I'm not just flattering you. I think it's important work, and it's sad that you have to struggle to find a bit of funding to do something that's important. When I see so much crap getting vast sums of money, a lot of it, ego fest stuff that I can't be bothered with at all. I mean, it is, but at least I think what you're doing is there must be a certain satisfaction insofar as you're enabling those people that in the documentary to get that stuff out there.
Well, that's my main aim, giving these people a voice. And I promised everyone in the group that if they wanted me to get their story out, I would get it out there by hook or by crook, whether it's in an article, whether it's in a documentary. And I think so far in the last few years, I have stuck to that promise as much as I can. I've written articles in The Light, I've written articles for other alternative news outlets. The mainstream media still aren't interested. I'm still story to them. 4 years later, I think there must be some kind of denotice on it or something, because they literally won't even discuss it now. Before, they might occasionally say, "Oh no, that's not for us," or now they, like I've said in a couple of other interviews last week, I can pitch a story to the Mail Online saying, "Would you like this story about this woman who had an altercation in Aldi?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll take that, lovely." And then 5 minutes later, I'll say, "Are you ready for the involuntary euthanasia story yet?" And then no, they don't say anything. It's just silence. And then I'll message them about something else and they'll reply. But now it's almost like they're trying to let me know that they can't talk about it by just the contrast between, pitching one kind of story and then pitching that one is huge. It's the silence compared to the responding. It's just, to me, it's obvious now that they aren't even allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, I never liked the media much. Definitely didn't like it during the COVID times. And of course, since then, Jacqui, since 2020, 2021, in so many other ways, it's the same pattern. It's the same pattern. I reckon 99% of the stuff that's in the media is not worth watching, listening to, reading, not important, distraction, inversion, all kinds of stuff going on there, But tell you, I think it's really good. I want everybody to hopefully go and watch. We put the link up. Watch the documentary. If you're in Swansea, then go along and there's on that's Richie Brown's excerpt. Go along there. You can watch it there. You can, as Jacqui says, you got the individual stories, which I really wanted to finish on this, Jacqui. I wanted to finish because I did watch it, as I say, and I was following it all the way through. And then we get to the end of the movie, which I found personally extremely moving and very poignant. And what I thought I'd do, just by way of a change to finish this our discussion tonight, I want to basically play out on that, because I think when you folks see what you're about to see, there's nothing more I can say, and there's nothing more that you can do other than watch the whole thing, get these people's story, and so Jacqui, thank you very much for coming on this evening. It's always lovely to see you, and it's great the work you're doing. I absolutely admire you. You are a rare breed, as they say, insofar as you actually do pursue truth, and that's something I think to be admired. So look, folks, I'm going to play out in this one here. Just stick with us for the next I think it lasts for 2 minutes, and I'll see you later on in the week. But from Jacqui and myself, it's good night. Play.
An organisation that seems to have little to do with health but power and control for a transnational bourgeoisie that organises itself through the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Club Rome, World Economic Forum and the UN. Why, for instance, as I documented in my article, were so many of the pandemic exercises in the last few decades ran out of the Military Psychological Warfare Centre, Johns Hopkins University? And why is Johns Hopkins asking if we were ready for the next pandemic?